Welcome to UO Today. I'm Paul Peppis, Director of the Oregon Humanities Center. My guest today is Mark Watson, Interim Dean of University of Oregon Libraries. He also serves as Associate Dean for Research Services. Thanks, Mark, for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
So let's start with your career trajectory. How did you come to be an academic librarian?
My path followed a traditional trajectory for people my age. I'm not sure it's so representative anymore. But I aspired to be a PhD working as a faculty member in an English department. That was, as a child, I wanted to be a cattle rancher, but once I had switched over to academia, I wanted to be like you and many of my colleagues here on campus. And I actually pursued a graduate degree in English literature at Washington State University and worked my way through the master's program, but felt like I kind of hit a wall there in terms of seeing myself into the years and the rigor required to complete the PhD. And I was working for a professor at the time who was on the cutting edge of using technology in the humanities, interestingly enough. He had written several computer programs to analyze the text of Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. And he had a fleet of graduate students who were all entering the text on these computer terminals and marking it up with what I've now come to understand is SGML. So in a sense, back in 1983, I was getting some experience doing text encoding. And I didn't really understand that or have an inkling of what it would come to be someday. But, when I went to talk to him about my future plans, and he said, you might be cut out for librarianship and information science. And I said, oh, well, what's that about? And he sent me to the library across the quad, and I got Peterson's guide out and did a little research. And the next year, I ended up at the University of Chicago, and where I spent 3 years working on a master's degree in information science. And from there, I actually came to the University of Oregon, put down some roots, and I've been here ever since.
My alma mater is the University of Chicago.
Well, we share that in common with the provost.
Yes.
As well.
I think I may have been there at the same time that you were there.
I was there 83 to 86.
I came in 86.
Wow. What do you know? Small world.
Yes. So my next question is about the libraries in general. How many libraries are at the University of Oregon?
We have 7 library locations. And a lot of people aren't aware. They, of course, know about the main library, the Knight Library building on campus. And they're probably aware of the Price Science Commons and Research Library, which underwent a renovation and got some press at the time. But we also, of course, have a library in the law school. And there is a library outpost in Portland. On campus, there's a library in the mathematics Fenton department. And we also have a library in the College of Design. And we also have one over at the Institute of Marine Biology in Charleston. So several remote locations, if you will. And we were getting pretty good at connecting with them even before COVID. And of course now, that's the way we do everything.
So you've raised the question of COVID and remote connection. Tell us a little bit about the changes that the libraries have undergone in the face of the COVID crisis since March.
Well, just like every organization and institution and business, it feels like, in our city, state, region, country, the library has had to come to grips with how to move the services that it provides online. And how do we approach supporting the students, faculty, in their mission to teach and do research, but mainly do it via electronic means. And that pivot took place, had to take place right away. And in some ways, it was really more of a change of degree rather than kind, because, many of the library's resources and certainly the ability to get a hold of people and work with people, we were already doing that online. We just weren't doing it as intensely or as much. And so we accelerated the process and immediately drew up what we called a rapid response team. And this is a group of librarians and staff who immediately recognized the challenge and wanted to say, well, what do we need to get together? So they went about developing remote resource guides for students and for faculty, and just creating what we call research guides or LibGuides, to pack as much information in there as we could. And of course, the library's always had a robust website. So, everything that we were trying to do and communicate, we pushed to the website. And for the most pertinent, up-to-date COVID information, we even created a banner, that was kind of alarming in its own way, but it was like, read this. So I'd say, it's just a matter of not so much what people talk about as a pivot, but really more, fully engaging something we had been doing all along.
Are there any lessons that you've learned from this intensification, things that you didn't expect to know, or things that you discovered that were interesting or valuable that you might build on in the future?
Well, one thing I've been surprised at and continue to be amazed at really is how effectively most of our services can translate to an online venue of one sort or another. And, there are even things that happen in the library that are very, that require contact with physical materials. Like, we still receive a lot of books and journals and things that people need to actually come in contact with. But even that operation, is that people were able to come in, gather the things they needed, and then once they went home, they had the same computer set up and internet connection that they had at work, and were able to basically go about that job. So with a little bit of shuttling back and forth, even some of the jobs that were most dependent, on being in the building and being able to handle physical items were able to be done. So there ended up being very few jobs that actually really required, having people in the building, which then of course makes you wonder, about all of the money and investment, that all of us have made in physical facilities over the years, when a lot of what we've proven that a lot of what we can do it without coming here. So that's I'd say that's by far and away one of the biggest surprises and biggest takeaways for me. There are things that I miss that while I think we can carry on business, I think the human element has been missing to a certain extent. And I just realized that I enjoy being around my colleagues. I just enjoy the informal interactions, that we've always been able to have, the spontaneous kind of, meetings or conversations that will erupt in hallways or when people stick their heads through the doors. I think this has been a little bit more lonely. I'm in my office today on campus, but in some ways it's just like being at home, because everybody here is behind their closed office door. And when we go out, we mask up, we stay away from each other. There aren't as many people in the building. And in some ways I'm thinking, wow, home actually is nicer because I'm closer to my couch or my fridge or some of the creature comforts that I can take advantage of. Here, I've tried to recreate that, I've tried to recreate home, and it sort of feels like duplicative. and somehow, I don't know, excessive. Why do we all feel like we need to have a home away from home, in order to do meaningful work? So I feel like a lot of it has come from, not the job changing so much as a lot of the personal interactions and things around the work.
So you've been serving as interim dean of the library since June of 2019. What's the status of the dean search? Can you give us an update?
Yes. That I've been in this role, the interim role, much longer than I thought I actually would. Um, the the campus found a search firm and started up a search for what they're going to call a new vice provost and university librarian. So we're transitioning away from the decanal nomenclature with this particular hire. Um, and I thought, things would proceed according to a timeline that would probably would have had somebody new, a new permanent person in place uh, by July 1st, kind of at the latest. But I remember the evening of, what was it, March 11th, 12th. I had put my application in for the position, and this was the eve of my airport interview, which really wasn't going to involve going to an airport or flying anywhere or actually leaving my desk. But my virtual airport interview was going to occur. I received a call from the provost saying, because we weren't going to be able to bring finalists in April, we were going to delay the VPUL search as well as the College of Design search and pick them back up in the fall. So that is what is happening. Although I think that we've learned a few things. We've learned that, well, we now need to proceed in a virtual manner. And we're going to have to face that we live in a time when finalists for a position are going to have to complete the whole thing online. And we're moving ahead with that. So the search is back underway. And it will depend, on how quickly things move again. It's like we've kind of took this time off, and now we're back in the same place that we were this time last year. So I'm hoping, that winter term will see interviews occur and get somebody hired.
Thanks for that update.
Yeah.
So one of the things that the library does is collaborate with the Jordan Schnitzer Museum of Art on campus. Will you tell us a little bit about some of the collaborations between the two institutions?
Well, we have, over time, I would say that under Adrienne Lim and Jill Hartz, we began to share a lot more information and have a lot more interaction between our staffs. I mean, we were invited over to the JSMA. We've toured their facility. We've met with them, learned about how they do things that we do, except for different types of materials like inventory control and supplying metadata, digitization. And then Jill and Adrienne applied for and successfully received a Mellon grant that we are about to finish up this December. And that is by far and away the biggest collaboration, that we've ever had together. And faculty have worked with both JSMA and librarians. They've selected materials that reside in either or both of the locations and have created really marvelous digital humanities projects. And we're currently finishing up the second three more that are going to be done here very shortly. And that's been a big undertaking. And I think it's really paved the way for future collaboration.
In addition to COVID, we're witnessing this reckoning on race in the United States of America and the Black Lives Matter movement. And I was wondering, what are the kinds of resources that the library has developed to help people, our students and our faculty, learn about diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. For a long, long time, we've considered the building of our collections as a way that we can really contribute to the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts on campus is that the more diverse voices and material and that we can collect, put into the collection that represents different approaches and offers opportunities for people to explore topics that aren't necessarily, within the old traditional canon. We've taken opportunity of that, and we've spent a lot of money acquiring databases and other resources to facilitate that. We have access, for example, to like the entire text of the Chicago Defender. And for the opening of the Black Cultural Resource Center, we acquired a large database called the History Makers, which is like oral histories of prominent African Americans and their contributions. But more recently, we've started to try and support some of the messaging that everybody has felt has been important, to speak out in response to the murder of George Floyd. The library did work internally to create an anti-racism statement, and we put a number of actions in there that we wanted to make sure that we were going to follow up on. And we also created one of these LibGuides, research guides that I mentioned earlier on anti-racism. And that is something that I think is a very rich research tool that, especially for students, that are interested in probing some of the collections that we have and getting more into that area.
Yes, I've checked out that particular guide, and it's really rich and valuable. I'm grateful to your staff's work on that. It's really a wonderful resource for us. As part of the reckoning on race, the library has come in for some controversy around the murals that are there. Would you tell us about that controversy and how you've responded to it?
Yes, the library has had 4 very large murals ensconced in the historic portion of the building. So when the original portion of the building was constructed during the WPA era, and these murals were definitely of that era, and 2 artists, the Runquist brothers, were commissioned to create these murals. And they used a motif called the tree of knowledge, the tree of civilization, and they set out to depict the advancement in the arts and the sciences and the advancement in human achievement through their work. Unfortunately, the way that progress was depicted was it showed that there was this clear movement, from an age during which people of color and Aboriginal peoples or indigenous peoples were at the bottom and represented the primitive stage of society, and then it went up the tree and everybody became more light-skinned. And over time, for obvious reasons, people have questioned, whether it was appropriate to have this very visible symbol or interpretation of the way that humanity has evolved, in a building that's supposed to represent the views of everyone. And under Adrian Lim, I would say we went through a process of trying to contextualize the murals. We put up signage acknowledging the fact that they were unwelcoming and presented a view that is no longer acceptable, in our society and our thinking. We did an art show that offered students ways to present alternative art to the murals. But I think what's happened in the last year is we've realized that it's not enough. We really need to take this seriously, and we need to do more than just simply educate, although I think we always want to educate. And so the decision was made to cover the murals, to preserve them, yet to cover them. And so we contracted with the Heritage Foundation in Portland and hired a conservator to come and assess the murals and whether they could be removed safely. It ended up they could not. So they devised a way to actually cover them. And the work was completed in the last week of September. And we've also put up new signage explaining why we did that. And I think it offers people an opportunity, essentially not a blank slate, but a new canvas, on which, the future message that we want to portray could be written or installed.
Thanks for bringing us up to date on that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to shift a little bit and ask you about open access publishing. What is open access publishing and what are its benefits? Why is it a good thing?
Well, I think that, open access publishing is not complex. It really is sort of the agenda for all of us that, contribute to the creation of original knowledge and want to put it out there for the benefit of others and society in general. So open access sort of takes this idea that the reason why we do our work is to enhance human society, that all more efforts should be made not to have this research end up being locked away or put behind paywalls that make it hard for the people who we want to benefit to get to. So it just seems like that what's happened over time, I think the Academy in the 20th century outsourced the publication and distribution mechanisms for academic scholarship. And that was helpful at the beginning. It was mostly academic societies, and the members of those societies were the scholars themselves. So it all seemed pretty cozy. But over time, big business, entered it. For-profit publishers sprung up, and bit by bit, we found ourselves in a position of having to buy back the research that the Academy produced for prices that kept inflating every year and inflating to exorbitant amounts. And I think a lot of people finally said, this is completely wrong. We want our research to be widely available. We don't like this situation where even we might have to ask for permission to publish our own research on our own websites, according to some of these agreements. So there's been a big effort internationally as well as nationally to try and put mechanisms in place that will ensure that our research, is widely available to everyone.
So the library just recently announced an open access article processing charge award fund. Tell us what that is and how it will support faculty.
Well, one of the big questions that arises is, well, what are you going to do about it? How do you change, this system that you are so upset with? And what's happened, I would say, in the last this first couple decades of the 21st century is that we are exploring different kinds of business models that would be an alternative to this sort of pay to read model, the subscription model that we've been stuck with for so long. And one of the ways that people are trying to make scholarship more freely available is that instead of paying this subscription, you essentially pay to publish. And this would be an article processing charge instead of a subscription. And it would be paid by an institution, an individual, and in a lot of cases in the United States, that libraries have tried to step up and help promote this particular model and provide subventions to faculty in order for them to be able to publish their research. Because the average cost is probably in the couple $1,000 range to do it this way, because publishing will never be free. We want the research to be accessible to everyone, but we still have to figure out a way to pay to get it out there. So APCs is one model, and it's one way we can help.
So you've been a librarian at U of O since 1986. How has your work changed over the years?
Oh, well, I would summarize it. I guess it'd be to the point where I'll have to, think in summary terms that I think my library career has spanned the transition from analog to digital, from the era in which we used typewriters, IBM Selectrics, to type bibliographic information onto cards that were physically taken out to a wooden catalog, and a rod was pulled out, they were dropped down in, and we put the rod back. And in fact, when I came in 1986, one of my first jobs was to supervise card filing. I found out that it had nothing to do with getting to supervise people. It was teaching me the card filing rules. The people that filed the cards were really good at it. So, and I remember getting my first computer. I remember the day that they decided to give everyone a telephone. Until then, we had one departmental phone that had a flag attached to it, and we would all take turns answering the phone and taking messages for each other and putting them on our desks. Email has revolutionized everything that we do, and now it's considered the older technology. But it's really been that. Really, I've gotten a front seat on the transition to the digital age. It's been very interesting.
So this will be my last question, Mark. Given your long perspective, how do you envision academic libraries in the future?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that over the last few months, and I think that the world has changed in ways that I think we all realize are going to have a continuing impact. And I think that, what we're going to continue to need to do is to embrace the techniques and technologies and ways in which we can connect people with the information that they need, however that's going to be done. And I think libraries are responsible for getting specialized services to individuals. I'm thinking of graduate students and faculty and their more specialized needs, and then providing information for all the undergraduates. So there's the role for involvement in teaching and in supporting research, is absolutely going to continue and be central to what we do. I think we're just going to continue doing it in ways that I probably can't even imagine yet. I mean, I think of the change that's occurred between the typewriter that was on my desk and now talking to you and doing an interview today via Zoom. What will happen in the next 10 years? It will really be interesting to see.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it too. Thank you, Mark, for speaking with us today. It's been a really good conversation. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you for having me. I've enjoyed it a lot.
I've been speaking with Mark Watson, Interim Dean of the University of Oregon Libraries. Thanks for watching.